your hands and know that God's peace is perfect in your time of weakness. God says, I will keep you in perfect peace. Perfect peace. All you gotta do is keep your mind stayed on me. God says, I will keep you in perfect peace. My peace is perfect in your time of weakness. Stay on me. Just keep your mind stayed on me. The earth is the Lord, Psalm 24, and the fullness thereof, the whole world and they that dwell therein. All belongs to Him who has made us. He watches me. Can I ask you a question? So why should I be bound? When God has set me free, when God has set me free, can somebody tell me? So why should I be bound? Why should you be bound when Jesus died? Jesus died for you and me. And this is what He's done. Lift your voice and say, He has lifted all of my burdens. And He don't you know that God will make a way out of no way? Yes, He will. Say, oh yeah. So glad that He's my Savior. Thank you, Jesus, for being my Savior. He watches me. You just hang on in there. You just hang on in there. God says, I want you. I know how to hold you. I know how to take care of you. Yes, He is. He said, even if you make your bed in hell, I'll be with you. I'll stand beside you. I'll walk with you. My soul, my soul, my soul. Hallelujah. Thank you for keeping us, God. Thank you for your hand of protection, Jesus, all around us, God. Hey, all night and all day, your angels watch me. They keep me protected, and we say thank you for being the keeper. Hey, my soul. Hey, my soul. Hallelujah. Yes, Lord. Wherever you are, lift your hands and know that God's peace is perfect in your time of weakness. God says, I will keep you in perfect peace. Perfect peace. All you gotta do is keep your mind stayed on me. God says, I will keep you in perfect peace. My peace is perfect in your time of weakness. Stay on me. Just keep your mind stayed on me. The earth is the Lord. Psalm 24. And the fullness thereof, the whole world and they that dwell therein, all belongs to him who has made us. He watches me. Can I ask you a question? So why should I be bound? When God has set me free, when God has set me free, can somebody tell me? So why should I be bound? Why should you be bound when Jesus died? Jesus died for you and me. And this is what he's done. Lift your voice and say, he has lifted all of my burdens. And he yes, he will. Say,
Greetings. To God be the glory. Great things he has done. To Bishop Henning, Byfield, President of the Council of Bishops of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. To Bishop Adam Jefferson Richardson, Senior Bishop and my Bishop of the 10th Episcopal District. To Bishop Francine Brookins, Chair of the International Health Commission of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. To Reverend Dr. Miriam Burnett, Medical Director of the International Health Commission. To Reverend Dr. Natalie Mitchum, Executive Director of the International Health Commission. To all bishops, supervisors, general and connectional officers, to all A.M.E. lay, and to the more than 950 persons who registered as of now to attend the second annual Connectional Purple Sunday program. Greetings. I am Sister Rosalind Thibodeau Goodall, the program chair and today's MC. And on behalf of the planning committee for today's program, I welcome you. We are pleased that you chose to spend this time learning about Alzheimer's disease and how the A.M.E. Church is working with the Alzheimer's Association to provide programs and services to address the needs of our members and the community. As most of you know, Purple Sunday is a time set aside during church service to bring awareness to Alzheimer's disease. Some A.M.E. churches already observe Purple Sunday, and for that we are grateful. Today's program was designed to let you hear a firsthand account from a caregiver of a loved one suffering from Alzheimer's disease, present information on the importance of African Americans' participation in clinical trials, and talk about how churches and chapters can work together to benefit the masses. As is customary for all A.M.E. events, we will open with a word of prayer, which will be given by Mrs. Virginia Harvin, a member of the steering committee who is also the consultant for the Daytona Beach District of the General Central Conference in the 11th Episcopal District of Florida. Mrs. Harvin. Mrs. Harvin is traveling, and so I'm not sure that she is on. Reverend Burnett, would you graciously offer our opening prayer, please? I will offer the prayer. Most gracious and Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us together today to celebrate the second annual Connectional Purple Sunday program. Lord, we are here today to do your work your way. We are grateful for the program participants who have joined us to share their stories and to offer information as to how we may be helpful in our communities and in our congregations. Lord, we pray for the caregivers who are taking care of loved ones with Alzheimer's and hope that something that is heard today will resonate with them and help them on their journey. Bless us and keep us when others see us are drawn to you, is my prayer. Amen. The partnership between the A.M.E. Church and the Alzheimer's Association is managed through the A.M.E. Church's International Health Commission. Reverend Dr. Miriam Burnett serves as the medical director of the commission and co-chair of the partnership's steering committee. Reverend Burnett also serves as Episcopal supervisor of the 18th Episcopal District. She is an itinerant minister in the A.M.E. Church and also a medical doctor. In 2020, Reverend Dr. Burnett was appointed by the National Council of Churches USA as representative to the Council of Churches and as a consultant with its ecumenical partners on health to discuss our response to COVID-19, its implications on the future of the health and healing ministry. This consultation is a beginning of the active participation in the World Health Organization. She continues to work with the national volunteer agencies active in disaster relief. Dr. Burnett is a strong advocate of holistic health. She received a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from York College of the City University of New York, undertook postgraduate studies from Queens College of SUNY, and obtained a Doctor of Medicine from Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. She is a U.S. Army veteran, and we hope that by now you have received your flip book, and we hope that you will take the time to read more about Reverend Dr. Miriam Burnett. Without further ado, I present Reverend Dr. Burnett.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible? It is my pleasure to be able to be with you all today as we begin to celebrate the second annual Connectional Purple Sunday. This is a day that we begin to ask for some additional information. This is a day where we hear testimonies of those who have been caregivers. This is a day when we learn more education. We learn about how to connect with our Alzheimer's chapters. One of the things that is important about today is that we also get to learn of the abundance of A.M.E. professionals who are trained and qualified to lead us in this endeavor. The Health Commission of the A.M.E. Church does its very best to be able to provide health education and health promotion so that we can expand opportunities to promote and influence those areas of importance for our health. One of them is the recognition of the early signs of Alzheimer's. The other thing that is important for us is the ability to know what are the risks and what are the symptoms. Also important for us is an ability to understand and then become active and advocate in potential legislation, in potential access to resources, programming, and research. That research can be both clinical, requiring medications, or it can also be a social, environmental kind of research. It's important to recognize that since 2019, in June, when we signed our memorandum of understanding with the Alzheimer's Association, we have been able to provide activities around community forums, webinars around caring in the age of coronavirus, caregiving in the age of coronavirus, understanding Alzheimer's, knowing the 10 warning signs. We had Alzheimer's talks on COVID, dementia, and caregiving. We had 2 webinars around research, one on bioethics and clinical trial research, the other on inclusion in dementia in research. We've attended community leader summits. We've co-branded 7 informational brochures. We've created in collaboration a co-branded clergy guide and a toolkit that will allow all of us around the globe, around the connection, to create local and regional Purple Sundays, where we educate our communities about Alzheimer's and other dementias, where we create opportunities for a call to action, where we create state advocacy around state advocacy days and advocacy kickoffs and future advocacy opportunities. It's an opportunity for us to be at the local level, to be able to connect with our local Alzheimer's Association chapters. We encourage walk teams via the A.M.E. National Team website. We create all kinds of opportunities, the newest of which is our volunteer onboarding and training, which you'll hear more about later. We also look to our next 5 years, where we speak to African American communities with care and support services, where we address and provide research and advocacy activities, where we plan to expand this programming from the United States to around the connection. It's a daunting task, but we know that we can accomplish this goal. And so therefore, without further explanation, because I am excited about the process for today, I'm going to put you in the hands of Bishop Francine A. Brookins, the chair of the Connectional International Health Commission of the A.M.E. Church. Bishop Brookins, otherwise known as Bishop 141, comes to us and hails from the state of California. She is an attorney. She is a carer for people. But most of all, she is a child of God. She is a social justice advocate. She is one who I call friend. And I'm glad to be able to say that she is a major force in driving the work of the A.M.E. International Health Commission. And so, Bishop Brookins, we are in your hands.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burnett. In your outstanding introduction presented by Sister Rosalind, she did not say, I don't think, that you are also the supervisor, Episcopal supervisor for the 18th Episcopal District. And I know that the people of Lesotho, Botswana, Eswatini, and South Mozambique would like to hear that said, because they love you so much and are working so well with you with our growing ministries and other missionary services. It is my privilege today to be back at this outstanding event. I still can remember tears that I shed during our last event that occurred this year with Supervisor Christy Davis Jackson. She told us of such a moving testimony that it still speaks to my heart. But it is my privilege right now to present to you the Right Reverend Anne Henning Byfield. She is the 135th elected and consecrated bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. She currently serves as the bishop of the 13th Episcopal District, which includes the states of Tennessee and Kentucky. She is the very capable and courageous president of the Council of Bishops of the A.M.E. Church. She's a golden member of the first and the finest Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I favor them, you know. She dares to live, learn, lead, and love God with creativity and passion as a preacher, a psalmist, a spoken sacred word artist, a strategic consultant, a writer, composer, wife, mother, and grandmother. I would dare say she is also a friend. I present to you now the Right Reverend Mother in God, Anne Henning Byfield.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. We will bless the Lord at all times. God's praises shall continually be in our mouths. To Bishop Adam J. Richardson, Senior Bishop, and to Bishop Francine A. Brookins, who I thank you for that introduction, who is the capable chair of this commission that sponsors the ministry to the Alzheimer's, to community, to Dr. Miriam Burnett, who is indeed the Episcopal Supervisor of the 18th Episcopal District and the Executive Director of the International Health Commission, and to Mrs. Rosalind Goodall, who has given many, many years of her life to the cause of healing and justice. And we thank you for the opportunity to speak on the church's responsibility and how we can support. The African Methodist Episcopal Church has historically been in the forefront of health and healing and social action and justice. We were known even from our earliest recorded history of our intervention and support for those who had yellow fever. Purple Sunday is an opportunity to continue the legacy for healing for the African Methodist Episcopal Church and for families who have, for persons who have Alzheimer's and for families who are supporting those persons with Alzheimer's. As a child, and significantly a preacher's child, I remember the hushness of church leaders as they talked about certain sickness. We never heard cancer or mental challenges or suicide. Those were words that we would never, they wouldn't speak to when a person was sick or dying. And even with then dementia and Alzheimer's, they would simply say to suggest that that person was not in their right mind. We must not continue to stigmatize disease and diseases and be silent when we have a spiritual and moral obligation to do so. While this disease does not discriminate against by color or gender, The reality, like many diseases, the Black community is most vulnerable. We are twice as likely as white older adults to have dementia and Alzheimer's. We have some inherent and systemic conditions that increase the possibility of Alzheimer's: cardiovascular conditions and high blood pressure, obesity, high cholesterol, drug use, and in some cases, substance abuse. And so, as the church, we must act and not react. We must be informed and so informed. We must know that not only does it impact the African American community, but our members. They're saying that most of our churches, not a lot of our churches, are graying. Since I grayed early, I don't know that I like that term, but the likelihood that we're going to have members and family members who are who have Alzheimer's or supporting family members who are. So, what can we do specifically? The first is that we can support all persons who live with various challenges. Then we can institute a spirit, a time of prayer for the healing of not just Alzheimer's, but particularly for Alzheimer's, and for a divine, miraculous healing from God, to teach biblical principles of justice and fairness and of holiness and health, to advocate for them in demands for better health care and congregational allocation for research and with active advocacy groups, to raise money for research and particularly and for family care, to stay in connection with our members who have Alzheimer's or families who are taking care of them in worship and visitation. We must begin to do some pro things like making CDs of worship so that we can share with them, we can sing with them, we can read scriptures. Use members who are retired as medical and health care facilities, care professionals, to provide leadership and support, to develop support groups is a very easy way, even in the social distance environment. Encourage and enable chapters of your congregation to participate in the Walk to End Alzheimer's, and by all means to create an environment for a healthy lifestyle. And so we want encourage families to talk about it, to share it, and that we are welcoming church, and that the church must talk about it and not be silent, and to teach how we can live. And so that's a simple way of prayer, of biblical study, and activism. It is now my time to introduce someone, and that is Attorney Kristen Henning. She's a nationally recognized legal scholar and activist in juvenile injustice reform, as she is a Bloom Professor of Law and the Director of Juvenile Justice Center Clinic and Initiative at Georgetown Law School. She advocates for reform in the juvenile and criminal legal system and to fight for the criminalization of Black adolescents. Attorney Christian Henning speaks on the intersection of race, adolescence, and policing. Her book, The Rage of Innocence, is a powerful analysis of how the legal system criminalizes normal adolescent behavior in African Americans and people of color rather than of white. And so she has worked as a public defender. She is currently the director of Mid Atlantic Juvenile Defender Center. She serves on the board of directors for the Center of Children's Law and Policy. She received her BA from Duke University, a JD from Yale University, and has received numerous awards. And so I'm excited to introduce my niece and a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Attorney Kristen Henning. We cannot hear Chris.
All right. Thank you, Bishop Auntie, for catching that. So I wanted to say thank you to Bishop Auntie Byfield and to Bishop Brookins and to Ms. Goodall for including me in this program today. I am not here to talk about juvenile justice. I am here to talk about Alzheimer's and my family's journey with Alzheimer's. And so I will never forget the day that I was sitting in my office in Washington, D.C.
Attorney Henning, we cannot hear you. Will you check your mic again? I know it was working earlier.
It sure was. I'm not on mute. Maybe James can help us. All James is saying that you, Bishop Auntie, for catching. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. It sounds like I can be heard. So let me just say this. I want to start from the beginning because I think this is really important. I want to share my family's journey through our journey with Alzheimer's. And that journey for me began when I was sitting in my office in Washington, D.C., and I received a call from a stranger. And the woman on the other end of the phone asked me if I was the daughter of Dr. Rita Clyburn Henning. And with a bit of hesitation and concern in my voice, I said yes. And the woman then told me that she was my mother's student in the Rocky Mount Cape division of Shaw University. And she was taking my mother's class in early childhood education, and that my mother had now shown the exact same video in 3 separate classes and had no idea that she had done so. Her students were all very concerned and didn't know quite what to do. This particular student had the very smart idea of searching on the internet to see if she could find one of my mother's relatives, and she found me. And I remember that day shutting my office door and crying and crying and crying. And my office manager knew that something was wrong and came in to my office after a while and convinced me to go home. And so indeed, I packed up and went home, all the way home from DC to North Carolina. And that was the beginning of a very long journey for me and for my family, trying, one, to understand what the disease was, helping my father, who had fallen into depression as a result of my mother's illness, figuring out what help both my mother and father needed, and figuring out how to pay for it. And that included getting a proper diagnosis. And so what's especially tragic about my mother's case is that my mother was in her 50s when she started showing the signs of Alzheimer's. And in fact, we later learned that she had early onset Alzheimer's, which is a very rare form of the disease that strikes only 5 or 6% of the persons who have Alzheimer's. By definition, early onset Alzheimer's is when you show symptoms and begin to progress in the disease before the age of 65. My mother was in her 50s when she started showing symptoms. And to be clear, my mother was in the absolute prime of her life, in the prime of her career, and she was physically healthy. She was smart and active in church and home and in community. And because she got the disease so early, and because she was so physically healthy, it meant that she would probably live a very long time with the disease and likely ultimately die from the disease, Alzheimer's, and not from other health ailments. And indeed, she did live for well over 10 years with the disease, which progressed year after year, from just getting confused sometimes to playing the same video over and over in class, to not being able to fly alone or to travel with my aunts like she used to, not remembering who I was or who my siblings were, forgetting how to walk, forgetting how to talk, forgetting how to eat, forgetting how to swallow, which led to an ultimate deterioration of other bodily functions. And as we learned more about early onset Alzheimer's in particular, we thought about her biological lineage. And we reflected on the fact that my mother's mother, meaning my maternal grandmother, had what was identified as dementia and died early. My mother's aunt, my great aunt, was sometimes referred to as crazy. Because she did very strange things in her neighborhood, and people wrote her off as being mentally ill instead of understanding her disease for what it likely was. So sometime after my mother got sick, my father and I were talking, and we realized that my grandmother and my great aunt probably had early onset Alzheimer's, but people didn't know what it was. People didn't want to talk about it the way we should, and people didn't get the kind of help, the right kind of help at that time. And so let me just pause here and say how incredibly glad I am that we are here talking about this in the A.M.E. Church. Another really important piece of our journey is my father's story. My father was my mother's primary caregiver, and he really struggled with this. And especially he struggled because it was so incredibly early in my mother's life. My father used to talk about how he had planned to retire and travel and enjoy life, and all of that was snatched away from him as a result of Alzheimer's. He became quite depressed, and my heart breaks every single time I think about how difficult it was for him to navigate. There was a point at which he had to start helping my mother prepare to teach her own classes. He would type her notes for her for work, and eventually he had to wash her and dress her, and she would get angry, as so many Alzheimer's patients do when they don't understand what's happening and they can't control what's happening to them. And there were times when my mother became aggressive and physical, and it was very difficult for my father. And he felt like, unfortunately, at times he did not have anyone in his local church to talk about the situation with him. And largely it was just because they didn't understand, not because they weren't loving and caring. But if you've never been through it and you've never seen it firsthand, it's really hard to understand. And so again, I pause and I say how incredibly important it is for the church to have this conversation and to think about how to provide support and resources for caregivers, creating opportunities for respite care for caregivers, emotional support for caregivers, grief share programming for those who are suffering while they watch their loved ones deteriorate. And so it really, as I indicated, our family really struggled to figure out how to help my mother and father, and to figure out, really, to be quite frank, what help they needed. And so we started with home health aides, right, who would periodically stop in and help with routine hygiene, healthy diet, cleaning the house, getting dressed, going for walks. But as my mother's condition began to deteriorate, she needed someone with much more she needed help with much more care. And so we found an adult daycare program that would pick her up in the morning and take her back home in the afternoon to give my father a break. And that was great for about a year, but even they couldn't take care of her for long because she needed so much one-on-one attention and had so much anxiety about being away from home and away from my father. So we returned to in-home care with many more hours, almost around the clock hours, at which point, unfortunately, my father got sick himself. And he went to the hospital. He also was very, very young. And we decided, my brother and I decided to move her, my mother, up to Maryland where we live. And we began to search for a full-time residential placement. And that was truly yet another one of the most painful parts of the journey. We went to residential facility after residential facility, and it was really difficult to find something that felt right. So many of the facilities were deeply rooted in a business model instead of a caregiver model. And so many of the facilities left people sitting in wheelchairs in the hallways by themselves. There were no activities, and it was really quite awful. Even the first facility that we did put her in was a home. It was a very nice home. It was small, it was quaint, and there were staff who cared, but the care was inconsistent. And the owner was so committed to the business model that she really just didn't have the great skills that she needed to work with me and my family and my father as caregivers. And so my spirit just would not rest. And while my mother was still at that small home, I kept looking for other places. And really, by the grace of God, we found a wonderful place called the Sacred Heart Home in Hyattsville, Maryland. And I have to tell you that if you drive up to the Sacred Heart Home, even today, it is a multi-floor red brick building. And from the outside, it looks even less appealing than a hospital. But from the very first day, from the very first moment I walked in that front door of that building just to visit the facility, I can tell you that the Spirit of the Lord moved in that space. Right inside the door, there was a chapel, and the sisters, meaning the nuns, they were amazing, and they were loving, and they were kind. They helped us with the application process, and they held a bed for us until we could get the funding finalized. And I have to tell you, anybody who's navigated the process, holding a bed is like half the battle, right? My mother had her own room. We were able to visit her. We were able to call her, and they called us regularly just to report on how she was doing. And it was, though, really such a long journey to get there, which leads me to the final part of the journey that I really want to talk about with the church. So remember, I have been telling you about home health aides and adult daycare and intensive in-home care, and then a nursing home. And all of that cost money. And we paid out of pocket for every single level of care until we got to the Sacred Heart Home. And so here's the tricky part. My parents were middle class, and my parents saved and had a retirement income, and we have a large extended family, but that was not enough to pay for the level of care that we're talking about for as long as we're talking about. Remember, I said that my mother got sick in her 50s. So that meant my parents still had a mortgage on the house. My mother couldn't work anymore. Eventually, my father stopped working, both because he was caring for her, but also because of the depression. They had all the normal household bills in addition to the new healthcare bills. And so when you see middle-class families financially really quite wiped out because of healthcare, it's not just because families haven't planned for this. I was a young lawyer at the time and still trying to make my own way, and I had to step up and take over the bills. And I can tell you that I lost my entire personal savings twice over during that season of caregiving, just to keep my parents in their house, just to make sure my mother was taken care of. And but for the grace of God, they would have lost their home. And so we applied for state aid multiple times, and we hit hurdle after hurdle. And I really want to share this with the church. The most outrageous hurdle that we experienced, and that all of the Black church should stand up and take note of, was that it took quite some time for us to find a Social Security screener who would accept the medical records and certify my mother with a proper diagnosis of either dementia or Alzheimer's that would qualify her for Social Security disability incomes. The screeners literally told us that we were malingering, that we were lying so that we could profit from state aid. It was appalling and it was offensive. And I will never forget the day also that my father called me, and he told me that he needed me to drive down to North Carolina for one of my doctor's appointments because the screeners kept denying the severity of my mother's illness. And he was adamant that the screeners in our hometown were racially biased and discrediting us simply because we were Black. And my father was very smart. And even in his depression, he came up with this really great idea of bringing bringing my mother's resume to the doctor's appointment and to the Social Security appointment and giving it to the screener before the interview. And I remember my father and I sitting in the screener's office, forcing the screener to read my mother's resume to show that my mother had a PhD and that she was a professor. And I remember the screener being rude and dismissive and trying to figure out why in the world would her resume be relevant. And then he kicked us out of the office and he interviewed my mother alone. And then the screener walked out by himself after about 15 minutes. And he was quite ashamed. And he said, "Now I see why you gave me that resume." And of course, we weren't trying to claim that my mother was any better than anybody else or wouldn't lie because she had a degree, but we needed him to see that he was talking to a woman with an advanced degree who could no longer complete a sentence and who could no longer hold an intelligent thought all the way through. And he apologized for the previous denials of our application, and he finally certified her. And I can't imagine what it must be like for anyone who didn't have my father and who didn't have me as a lawyer who could come and sit in that room and insist that they accept the only diagnosis that was right. And so this is really something that we as a church need to be aware of. And then the second major hurdle that we encountered, even after we finally got her certified for Social Security disability insurance, my mother, we were told that we had to sell off all of their property except for the primary house because my father was still living there. So that means we had to sell my grandparents' house in Tennessee, even though we weren't generating any income from that, and my parents had planned to pass it down to us. But they told us we had to use whatever funds that we could find and access before we could qualify for disability insurance. And then after 3 years of paying out of pocket and moving my mother from North Carolina to Maryland, we finally got her into the Sacred Heart home with the state aid. And so I want to say to you that we as a community, and I think my aunt, Bishop Byfield, said it well, in the church, we as a community, we need a community of volunteers in the church who will help elders navigate this process, and families like ours. We were a very young family. We need a community of volunteers who will help elders prepare a living will, a traditional will, power of attorney, sign up for long-term care insurance, purchase funeral insurance, finding the right health care and the right facilities. And I will say that when my aunt was talking about bringing worship service to Alzheimer's patients, it really resonated with me. One of the things that I remember most is that even as my mother forgot who I was, and as she forgot who my siblings were, she never forgot the music of the church. And that was when she was the happiest. When we would bring music to the facility and we would roll her down to the church services at Sacred Heart Home and she would praise. And so that is something unequivocally that the church can do well. And so I will end this way. I really, I want to say that when we were going through, we weren't aware of the Alzheimer's Association. We weren't clear on what help and services they could provide. But since my mother passed away, our family, and I give great tribute to my brother, we have become really avid and faithful fundraisers for the Alzheimer's Foundation. And if I were able, I have one final photograph. I haven't been able to get my slides to move, but of our family, we now annually walk the Alzheimer's Walk. And if you can move it all the way to the end, please. Thank you so much. We now all walk as a family in the Alzheimer's Walk annually in Washington, D.C. And so I just want to say again, thank you to the church for having this extraordinarily important conversation, and to all the speakers who will come behind me to talk about the resources that are available. So thank you, and God bless.
I'm sure that so many of us have resonated with the information that you've shared. It's been so very helpful. having had 8 family members stricken with the illness, I think that they need to have a cliff notes for people like us, because we're not expecting this. So there is no preparation for it. But it's certainly something that the church needs to do. And your testimony has certainly helped us a lot today. And I appreciate it so very much. When I was talking to your Aunt Bishop Ann, just talking about Connectional Purple Sunday, and I said, oh, by the way, do you know anybody who might be a caregiver? And she said, oh, certainly. My niece Chris has been on that journey, and I think can add a lot to the conversation. And you certainly have done that. God bless you, and thank you again for being with us today. Now, we're asking that our attendees go to the chat. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask of us, we ask that you put them in the chat. They may not be answered today because of the length of our service and program, church service, church program, but we want to be certain to answer those questions, and we will do so and share them with the entirety. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat, and we will answer within the next week or so. So now I have the privilege to introduce someone I've been working with for the past, say, 2 years. And as has been stated, we've been working with the partnership for 3 years. And Miss Beverly Berry and I have worked closely for the past 2.5 years. Beverly is going to tell us about the collateral, the co-branded collateral that's been created because of this partnership. She's the project leader for the Alzheimer's Association's national partnership with the A.M.E. Church. Prior to joining the association, she was a lead transplant education specialist at the University of Alabama at Birmingham's Comprehensive Transplant Institute. During her time there, she co-authored 3 publications that focused on minority health disparities, of which Alzheimer's is one, and that focused on equitable access to kidney transplantation. Beverly is a certified health education specialist credentialed by the National Commission on Health Education. Ms. Berry will now review our co-branded collateral. Thank you, Beverly, for joining us today.
Thank you, Ms. Roslyn, and thank you everyone that has joined us today. Again, I'm Beverly Berry. I'm one of the directors of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Engagement at the Alzheimer's Association Home Office, and just so excited to be here today. Kristen, I want to thank you so much for that moving testimony. Based on the comments in the chat, there are many that can resonate or that can relate to your testimony, and some may be in the midst of navigating this devastating disease right now, that may be caring for a loved one. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of our guest speakers that have taken the time to share your experience and the knowledge with our community regarding this devastating disease. And to our audience, thank you for being here today to receive this information. And I pray that the information that is shared here today blesses you beyond measure, and that you not only take it for yourself to use it and apply it, but that you also share this information with others in the community. I'd like to send a special thank you to Sister Rosalind Thibodeau Goodall for leading the efforts to bring us this amazing program, as well as the members of our Connectional Purple Sunday Planning Committee and our National Partnership Committee. So now that you've learned about our partnership, the significance of the partnership, I'd like to share with you all some resources that we have created, that we've co-developed and created as a part of this relationship to help support local efforts. While this is a national partnership, the goal of this partnership is to really be intentional about being in communities, so that stories like Kristen, her testimony, that families don't have to go through this journey alone, that they have the resources and information needed to help them navigate their caregiving journey with their loved ones. So before I dive into the resources, I think it's important to give you the backstory on how these resources were developed. In the beginning of our partnership, we held a series of community forums with various A.M.E. leaders and members to learn about the needs, challenges, barriers, and opportunities that exist in A.M.E. communities as it relates to Alzheimer's and dementia. Through the community forums, we learned a great deal about what was needed. And one of the number one requests from A.M.E. members and leaders is that a need for education. But we also learned that A.M.E. leaders didn't have sufficient resources to be able to minister to their congregations and communities about Alzheimer's and dementia. And so together, we worked to create a series of co-developed brochures, Purple Sunday Toolkit, clergy guide, to bridge that resource gap. And when I say we have a national partnership planning committee that consists of a mix of Alzheimer's Association, home office staff, and our A.M.E. Partners, which many of you all have met this morning, or this afternoon rather. So we created these resources, and I'd like to start with the Purple Sunday Toolkit. Keeping in mind that all of these resources can be found on amechhealth.org/ALZ is where you can find these resources. The Purple Sunday Toolkit provides A.M.E. churches across the country valuable resources to improve the lives of those that may be living with Alzheimer's and those that may also be caregivers as well. The Purple Sunday Toolkit provides information that helps churches across the country plan their Purple Sunday events at a local level. So this is a great toolkit, or if you're looking to plan a Purple Sunday event, this would be a great resource for you all to have. As you can see, Purple Sunday can be a catalyst to seek early diagnosis, have a better understanding of the disease, and disseminate knowledge of the care and support resources available. So this is a great resource to get you started if you want to plan, a local Purple Sunday in your community. The next resource that I'd like to share with you is the clergy guide. This clergy guide can be used to learn about Alzheimer's and other dementia, the importance of an early diagnosis. It also includes some of our resources like our 24/7 helpline, which is 1-800-272-3900, support groups and our education programs, and just an array of our resources so that individuals in the community, within the A.M.E. church, can have access and know that we exist and the resources that we're able to provide. The clergy guide not only includes information about Alzheimer's and dementia, but it also includes pastoral resources such as scriptures and prayers that provide comfort, hope, peace, and support to all of those affected or impacted rather by Alzheimer's and dementia. We also have a series of co-branded brochures that we have, and it takes a look, these brochures take a look at caregiver stress, how to manage that, how to recognize the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, and even just planning for the future. For those that may have dementia, it gives them the opportunity to plan early so that there are no surprises and everyone can be on the same page. So these brochures are really handy and can help, again, help members navigate their caregiving journey and help their loved ones that are living with Alzheimer's and dementia. Again, these resources can be found on amechhealth.org/ALZ. The next series of brochures that we have together takes a look at some of our online caregiver resources, and again, our 24/7 helpline, as well as how to live well with dementia. So these are resources that are available, that are co-developed for the A.M.E. church. And it just helps to get the information and the awareness out about Alzheimer's and dementia. And then the last resource that I'd like to extend to you today is the resource of our local Alzheimer's Association chapters. I just want to take a moment just to tell you a little bit about who we are at the Alzheimer's Association. We are the Alzheimer's Association. We are the leading voluntary health organization in Alzheimer's care, support, and research. In the same vein of research, we are also the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research. We are committed to advancing vital research toward methods of treatment, prevention, and ultimately a cure. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's and all of the dementia. And if we want to see that vision realized, whether it's in my lifetime or our children's lifetime, we have to be in communities. And that's why this partnership is so significant, because we need one another in order to be able to reach more communities. We have about 75 chapters across the country. And if you pair that with A.M.E. churches across the country, man, we can do some amazing work together. I think I saw in the chat where Cairo's A.M.E. church mentioned that they work very closely with their Tennessee chapter, and they don't really want to make it a competition, but they're the best. And so it just makes me think about that level of connection and engagement that we could have, not only in Nashville, Tennessee, or San Antonio, Texas, but across the country, how we can mobilize communities to provide this information so that no one has to go through this journey alone, so that folks know how to access resources for support. This is important because while this is a national partnership, again, the intention is to be in communities. This relationship can't sit at the top. It has to filter down to the local communities so that we can provide the education and outreach together in our communities. I think another fact that we need to know about Alzheimer's and dementia is that currently more than 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's, and over 11 million are serving as caregivers. As Black Americans, we face additional obstacles in that we are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's as our older white American counterparts. We may also be less likely to receive a timely diagnosis, or it's a diagnosis that's later in the stages of the disease due to a lack of access of insurance or even quality health care. So again, it just speaks to the importance of being in communities. And so, our chapters, many are on this call today, along with A.M.E. churches. And I know our chapters will be reaching out to see how we can provide education, how we can provide support groups within your area to provide the resources that our communities need. So they'll be reaching out. I'll also place a link that includes our chapter contacts as well, so that you all can begin that outreach and engagement. And if our chapters don't reach out, by all means, A.M.E. churches that are on this call and across the country, please feel free to reach out to our chapters and engage, because this information is so important and it's so needed in our communities. Well, at this time, I thank you all for taking a moment to hear about some of the resources that we're able to provide in communities. And I'll turn things back over to Sister Rosalind Thibodeau-Goodall. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Berry, for all that you do for the partnership and for sharing that valuable information with us. And as you were talking, someone wrote in the chat that her mother had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's this week, and she was unprepared and had no idea what to do. So I think that by information that's being shared today, we will be able to help a lot of God's people. Thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.
So many caregivers suffer in silence because, as Ms. Henning has said, they're unaware of the programs and services that are offered by the Alzheimer's Association. To that end, the steering committee of the Alzheimer's Association has set a goal to work with partner our local churches with local chapters. We're wanting to work through the presiding elder districts and are certainly trying to do that. However, Mrs. Deirdre Fisher Rockamore of the Bethel A.M.E. Church there in San Antonio, Texas, took it a step further and partnered her local church, Bethel, with the San Antonio chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Mrs. Rockamore works with Mrs. Sybil Hunter, who is the 10th District's Health Commissioner. And Mrs. Hunter coerced Mrs. Rockamore to serve with her on the Health Commission. And so now I'm going to ask Mrs. Hunter to talk about the team and to tell us more about how she was able to make that connection. Mrs. Hunter?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Rosalind. I'm Sybil Hunter, and I am a member of Bethel A.M.E. Church in San Antonio, Texas. My pastor is the Reverend Dr. Juan N. Tolliver,
And my presiding elder is the Dr. W. Raymond Bryant. Bethel has partnered with the Alzheimer's Association for more than 10 years. The members of Bethel and the San Antonio district have actively participated in the chapter programs. We have two representatives of the San Antonio and South Texas chapter here today, and I'm going to introduce them to you. First is Ms. Diane M. Turan. Diane is a licensed master social worker. She earned her undergraduate and graduate degree in social work from Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio, Texas, which also is the city where she was born and raised. She has worked in the field of aging for over 20 years, beginning as a facility social worker in long-term care. She spent 17 years with the Alamo Area Council of Governments, Area Agencies on Aging. She held several positions with the Area Agency on Aging for direct case management to caregiver services coordinator overseeing the agency's national family caregiver support and health and wellness programs. She's been with the Alzheimer's Association for a little over 2.5 years. She serves as the program manager with the San Antonio and South Texas chapter. She is a recipient of the 2018 Home Care Hero Award from the Alamo Area Home Care Council for her work in the field of aging. She was also named the 2021 Field Instructor of the Year by the University of Texas at San Antonio School of Social Work. And she's also a member of the National Association of Social Workers. Diane, timely submit the information to Bethel or to me so we can get the information out to the community of the programs that they will be sponsoring each month. And also with her is Deirdre Rockymore. Deirdre is an advanced practice registered nurse who has focused on psychiatry and gerontology. During her employment at the New Jersey State Department of Health, she serves as staff to the governor's Alzheimer's Disease Study Group, which was an early effort to collect data and provide education to the state. Though she has retired, she continues to teach and provide education through her business, A.M.E LLC, which is approved for nursing education in Texas and New Mexico. She is currently a community education volunteer for the San Antonio and South Texas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Her experience with Alzheimer's extends beyond the clinical area. Her grandmother, who was the love of her life, had vascular dementia, and she had an uncle who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Thus, her dedication to support the work of the Alzheimer's Association. So, Diane and Deirdre, take it away.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Mrs. Hunter. Thank you so much for having us today. It's so wonderful to be with not only you all, but Mrs. Rockymore was just commenting when we were coming on that, I think we're the only two that are together. So it's so nice to actually be in a room with Mrs. Rockymore sharing with you today. So I just wanted to kind of start off just giving a little background of how our connection started with the A.M.E. Church through our chapter. So actually in late December of 2019, our chapter started this wonderful journey with the A.M.E. Church. My actually first reaching Ms. Hunter, we were really going to look at participating in a Dream Week event to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and to invite the church members to our educational summit, which we had planned for March 14th of 2020. This then led to a community forum that the A.M.E. church members planned the evening before that on March 13th, 2020 at Bethel A.M.E. And I know that we were all very, very excited to have Dr. Carl Hill, who was going to come in person for both the forum and the summit. But I know that, of course, none of us would have planned, or known at that time the great effect the pandemic would have on our communities and on the world. So I remember being told on March 12th that we had to pack up what we needed from the office. And on March 13th of 2020, we would be transitioning to working from home. So needless to say, the forum and educational summit had to be postponed. It would take us a little time to transition and readjust, as we as a chapter really wanted to find a creative way to really stay connected with the community. Again, we knew that we weren't going to be able to do in-person events. And so really, amazingly to be able to transition to virtual, but how are we going to do that creatively with our communities? So it was actually through the creation of a weekly Facebook event that our colleague Sean Henry at the Houston and Southeast Texas chapter effectively named Pause and Ponder, Love, Faith, and Healing. What a wonderful name. I so thank Sean for thinking of that. So where our amazing volunteer through the partnership, Mrs. Rocky Moore, came to be so vital to our chapter. She became our first guest on June 3rd of 2021 and coordinated many of the subsequent guests to provide us with a better understanding of all the wonderful work being done by the A.M.E. Church. And I do want to highlight, please bear with me, because again, thinking of all the wonderful people that have joined us and many that are here today, I want to name those guests that we had on, had wonderful conversations with. And I know Mrs. Rocky Moore is going to then talk a little bit more about that. But we had guests such as Pastor Reverend Dr. Juan Tolliver of Bethel A.M.E., Reverend Dr. Lamel Taylor of Butler A.M.E., Reverend Dr. W. Raymond Bryant, Reverend Linda R. Carmen Bryant, Claudia Dunneman, Mentoria Lewis Sherfield, Phyllis Jackson of Hodges Chapel A.M.E., Carl Lowe of Brooks Chapel A.M.E. in Corpus Christi, Texas, Dr. Deborah Taylor King, who is the International President for the Women's Missionary Society, and Reverend Verna Young.
Okay, and so I would like to thank you again as well for the opportunity to be here to share information. And yes, it was wonderful getting to work with Diane and also with Jenny Funk, who is unable to be with us today in person, but she is with us where she is at the moment. And so she's with us in spirit. So when we were looking for people to be interviewed with the Pause and Ponder, the intent was to have the diversity of our global church reflected, as well as the wide variety of services that we provide. We also wanted to reflect the title of the program, which you've just heard. And so we were therefore looking for people who could speak to those topics, offering support, encouragement, as well as suggestions to cope with the lockdown because of the pandemic became very important. And each presenter was to share how they were coping during this pandemic as well. Interviewees came from all over the 10th Episcopal District and beyond. We also had one person who was from Philadelphia, and she was kind enough to share with us ways to keep motivated, ways to move so that we would not pack on the pounds, and also just various tips for wellness. Another interviewee shared with us that she volunteered her services working with clients on the Mexican border, and this was during the height of the restrictions of people coming into the United States from the South. We know that was a difficult time, and it was even during the pandemic, and yet she was very effective in what she shared with us. We also were informed of the global involvement of our church, and it was shared by the International President of the Women's Missionary Society, and that was, of course, Dr. Deborah Taylor King. Diane has already mentioned Sybil Hunter, and you did meet her, but I just want to add, whenever I had a challenge or when I couldn't get someone to say yes, then I would call on Sybil, and she always came through. Sybil is a significant player in what we do. She often stays in the background, but she is strong and she is very resourceful. Now, I want to highlight a program from last year's Purple Sunday event. Reverend Dr. Lamel Taylor, she pulled out all the stops to help us organize a spectacular virtual program built around the showing of the short film entitled Bewildered. This was starring Keith David, better known to many of us as Bishop Greenleaf. During this event, There was a panel presentation discussing Alzheimer's, which included Diane Turan, and she was sharing services available through the Alzheimer's Association of the South San Antonio and South Central Texas chapter. The program also included Dr. Parker, Beverly Berry, and several others. And to top things off, we had the producer of the movie, Gregor Wilson, also participate with us. Then we were greeted with a special musical selection by Carmen Bradford, the Grammy-nominated jazz singer, and her selection reflected the title of the program. This was truly a South Texas event that included our presiding elder, Raymond Bryant, and the San Antonio district of the A.M.E. Church. I can't say enough about how so many people came together at the right time to make this event happen. Another event I would like to share for a moment is the Walk to End Alzheimer's. I believe Bishop Henning mentioned this earlier. So this past fall, Bethel members joined the walk to raise funds for the association. Those who could not walk made monetary donations, but a small group did get together to walk and to celebrate those with the illness as well as the caregivers, knowing what a burden they carry. Diane and Jenny saw to it that we had what we needed. They provided the decorations so that we could decorate with the flowers around the church. And we actually carried the flowers and the flags as we walked so that we could inform other people in the community. Diane and Jenny, what can I say about them? They are always looking for ways to engage and connect with the A.M.E. Church. In order for any program or partnership to work, the leadership must be open, receptive, and willing to engage with volunteers. From the moment Diane, Jenny, and I finally met, both ladies have reached out and have found ways to stay connected. They are easy to work with, always pleasant, and right on time when reaching out. And I've watched their relationship with other volunteers as well. And there is a consistency in the way they function. So it has been a pleasure working with them so far. Diane.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Rockymore. Gosh, the feeling is mutual, and the respect for everything that you do and have done for us. So our community forum was eventually held virtually on January 28th of 2021 with Dr. Carl Hill, the association's Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, joining us to share vital information and getting the conversation started on dementia and the A.M.E. community. And I really appreciate what Ms. Kristen Henning mentioned and a lot of what we learned about what families needed and need in the community and the A.M.E. Church. We learned quite a bit, which supported the association's effort to break the stigma of reaching out about dementia. We heard feedback that the community looks to church leaders and those within the church with healthcare knowledge to provide guidance and advice on this topic. Caregivers need support, and the community as a whole seeks representation and relatability in order to feel comfortable and gain trust. We continue to stay connected by sharing information with our A.M.E. partners, as Mrs. Rockymore mentioned, on education programs and support groups. And Mrs. Rockymore has presented on various topics for us, such as 10 warning signs, understanding Alzheimer's and dementia, and healthy living for the brain and body. We look forward to continue the work ahead in meeting the community needs and strengthening our partnership with more volunteer onboarding efforts and offering education programs and support groups where they are needed. And I thank you. I heard that from Beverly. I have to say that with all of our other chapters joining us around the nation, I hope it is, right? I hope it's a challenge to see what we've done, that we are going to continue to build. And I look to our other chapters to either start those partnerships or continue those partnerships. On behalf of myself and the San Antonio and South Texas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, it's been an honor and a blessing to speak with you today. Thank you so much.
So much, Mrs. Turan, Mrs. Rockymore, and Ms. Hunter, for those connections and for that information. I feel certain that many members of our churches volunteer with Alzheimer's chapters. Now that they've seen the Bethel A.M.E. Church model, we encourage you to get involved, to get your church paired up with an Alzheimer's chapter. Now, as they say, teamwork makes the dream work. Speaking of teams, I want to tell you a little about a member of our team, Dr. Carl Hill, who, in addition to serving as the co-chair of the A.M.E. Church's partnership with the Alzheimer's Association, is also, as you've heard, the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Alzheimer's Association. As a result of Dr. Hill's leadership, the association has broadened its outreach to underserved communities with partners such as the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Black Nurses Rock, National Indian Council on Aging, and the National Asian Pacific Center on Aging. Dr. Hill previously served as the association's Vice President of Scientific Engagement. He's authored an editorial in the Journal of New England Medicine Neurology, highlighting the need for more diverse perspectives to address disparities and pursue equity in dementia science. Prior to joining the association, he spent 6 years with the National Institutes on Aging, where, among other things, he led the development of their health disparities framework. Dr. Hill earned his PhD from the University of Maryland School of Public Health. He holds a master's degree in public health from Morehouse School of Medicine and received their Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2019. Please join me in welcoming and hearing from our friend, our team member, Dr. Carl Hill.
Oh, thank you so much, Sister Thibodeau Goodall. I really appreciate that introduction, and greetings to all. Thank you for joining us for today's exciting second annual Purple Sunday. Tremendous applause to the planning committee. What a success. What a just tremendous opportunity to hear testimony and best practices in our pursuit of health equity in Alzheimer's and all other dementia. So, on behalf of all of our staff and volunteers all over the country, we at the Alzheimer's Association are thrilled to continue our partnership, a new 5-year partnership with the African Methodist Episcopal Church's International Health Commission, and believe that including diverse perspectives is critical to achieving health equity, meaning that all communities have a fair and just opportunity for early diagnosis and access to risk reduction and quality care when facing Alzheimer's or another dementia, like vascular dementia or Lewy body dementia. You see, the Alzheimer's Association works to develop strategic partnerships with trusted national and local organizations like this one with A.M.E. to create a pathway to greater health equity, mission engagement, and inclusion for everyone. The association is committed to providing all communities with resources and education to realize our vision. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementia for all communities. As we've heard here today, African Americans are twice as likely to have Alzheimer's or another dementia, and yet less likely to be diagnosed, less likely to be recruited to participate in research, and less likely to have access to care and support services. Essentially, this means that the people, our communities, who are most likely to have this devastating disease are least likely to be considered and treated. This is unacceptable and must change. We are excited about our work with the A.M.E. International Health Commission to pursue this change to achieve health equity. Please join us by seeking out your local Alzheimer's Association chapter so that we can work together to get these valuable resources to African American communities, our communities across the country, like my colleague Beverly Berry said earlier. So we're also excited today to hear more about how this change might occur from Dr. Monica Parker. Monica Willis Parker, MD, is a graduate of Fisk University, HBCU, and the University of Nebraska Medical Center. She joined the A.M.E School of Medicine faculty in 1995. She now leads the Minority Engagement Corps, one of 6 corps of the A.M.E Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Dr. Parker advocates and educates about the importance of research participation, so important for the elimination of health disparities in Alzheimer's and people of color. Active in many civic and social organizations, she was appointed the inaugural Health and Human Services Facet Director of the Links Incorporated. She serves and has served on several boards, which include the Georgia Alzheimer's Association Board of Governors, the Health Outcomes Task Force for the National Alzheimer's Association, the Georgia Museum of Art, and the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism for the State Bar of Georgia. So we're just really happy and honored to hear from Dr. Parker about ways that you might be involved in things that you might consider as we pursue greater equity for Alzheimer's and all other dementia for all communities. So Dr. Parker, are you there?
Greetings. Just before Dr. Parker comes, we thought it would be a good opportunity for us to take a exercise break. We do know that one of the things that impacts Alzheimer's and other dementias is when we sit too long. So therefore, our music ministry, our Ministry of Christian Arts, MCAM of the A.M.E Church, some of us heard it when we came on earlier, Be Ye Steadfast. What better song to tell us that we need to be steadfast in the work that we are doing around Alzheimer's, the work that we need to ensure that our caregivers, as well as those who are otherwise impacted, be ye steadfast. James, stand up, stretch.
Wherever you are, lift your hands and know that God's peace is perfect in your time of weakness. God says, I will keep you in perfect peace. Perfect peace. All you gotta do is keep your mind stayed on me. God says, I will keep you in perfect peace. My peace is perfect in your time of weakness. Stay on me. Just keep your mind stayed on me. The earth is the Lord, Psalm 24. And the fullness thereof, the whole world and they that dwell therein, all belongs to him who has made us. He watches me. Can I ask you a question? So why should I be bound? When God has set me free, when God has set me free, can somebody tell me? So why should I be bound? Why should you be bound when Jesus died? Jesus died for you and this is what he's done. Lift your voice and say, he has lifted all of my burdens. Yes, he has, and he is. don't you know that God will make a way out of no way? Yes, He will. Say, oh, yeah. So glad that He's my Savior. Thank you, Jesus, for being my Savior. He watches me. The kingdom. You just hang on in there. You just hang on in there. God says, I want you. I know how to hold you. I know how to take care of you. Yeah. Yes, He is. He said, even if you make your bed in hell, I'll be with you. I'll stand beside you. I'll walk with you. My soul, my soul, my soul. Hallelujah. Thank you for keeping us, God. Thank you for your hand of protection, Jesus. All around us, God. Hey, all night and all day, your angels watch me. They keep me protected. And we say thank you for being the keeper of. Hey, my soul. Hey, my soul. Hallelujah. Yes, Lord.
Oh, tremendous. Thank you for that. And I hope we were able to re-energize. And again, we're excited to hear from Dr. Monica Parker, who's going to tell us a bit more about how we can address these disparities and increase representation in Alzheimer's clinical trials so that treatments can be relevant for all people in all communities. So are you there, Dr. Parker?
Thank you so much. First of all, to all of the ladies in the A.M.E. Church. I've met and worked with a number of you across the country, but Rosalind's a good friend. But more importantly, there are so many women here in the state of Georgia, beginning with Bishop John Hurst Adams and his wife, Dr. Dolly Adams, who actually brought me to the larger A.M.E. Church, and Pastor Eason, Pastor Miriam Burnett, and now Reverend Davis, Bishop Davis, who is our bishop here in Georgia. It is the work that I started doing in 2008, 2010. And because of the work of women and the support of women in this A.M.E. church, regardless of where your connection is, I met you through sorority, through links, through something else. I want to say thank you because of you, there are more people of color participating in Alzheimer's research here in Georgia. And because of your participation, we're kind of getting known for our participation in African Americans participate in neurologic research. And you're going to hear from one of our participants a little bit later. But my task here today is to talk to you about why research is important. But before I get into some of that, I just want to say that as a physician, it's nice to hear all of these testimonies. And I really ache when I hear that somebody didn't get treated properly, they were delayed in getting a diagnosis. Well, part of that comes from not knowing what to ask for and how to interact with a doctor who knows something about it and get referred. And before I get into stuff, because somebody's going to ask me, in the chat, I'm putting in this places how you can locate an Alzheimer's disease research center. One of the chat questions was, what about legitimate research? There are 33 National Institutes of Health, National Institutes of Aging, National Institutes of Research in the United States. Log into that little website and look for them. The thing about identifying legitimate research, and you pay for this because it's National Institutes of Health, your tax dollars have funded this and paid for this. You need to participate in research. One of our colleagues said a couple of weeks ago on a program, you have optimal health if you have access, but you have maximum health if you participate in clinical research. And that's because all of the medications and things that are being developed have to be developed with your participation in order for them to be certain that they work for you. And you have to find a medical resource to get your health care and establish a relationship with a primary care doctor. If the primary care doctor you're working with isn't suiting your needs, please find another one. Find another one that's associated with a large medical center so that they can confer with the neurologist, the cardiologist, the oncologist, so that they can better address whatever problem it is you have. The worst thing you can do is sit around and bemoan the lack of this, that, or the other without conferring with a proper medical source. So that's my big takeaway from you. There's a list of Alzheimer's disease research centers. You want to identify legitimate research, there it is. My job today is to talk to you about what Alzheimer's risk in research is. Next slide, please. And thank you, Mr. Wilson, for helping me. What is clinical research? So let's get away from Tuskegee. I don't want to hear it. Don't even want to talk about it, okay? There are three different types of research. There's patient-oriented research. There's epidemiologic and behavioral studies. That's something that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with medicine. And then there are outcomes and health services research. Three different types of clinical research. Keep going. You've probably participated and didn't even know. Epidemiologic and behavioral studies are studies that examine what kind of disease do you have, who gets it, what are the things that are affecting your health, how is it that people make decisions related to their health, how do people deliver health care, how do people learn to be better caregivers. Next. So clinical trials, there's a lot of noise in the news about clinical trials, and we need to get into clinical trials, but I want you to understand what a clinical trial is and what it is not. Okay, when they're working on animal models, they call that preclinical stuff. Phase 1, they have 20 to 80 people who may test out a certain drug that's been tested in animals, but now we're testing it in humans. Phase 2 is, okay, phase 1 showed that this drug is safe in people. Let's see how much medication it takes to make a definitive change in whatever it is we're looking at it. That's about 100 to 300 more people. Phase 3 involves about 1,000 to 3,000 people. Okay, if we've tested this, we've maximized the drug use, we're testing for safety and efficacy, or does it work well in a larger number of people? And once we get through phase 3 trials, and if it works really well, then we go to the FDA and ask the FDA to approve this drug so that we can start getting doctors to prescribe it and get it to people. Next, please. So if you want to participate in a study, how do you find a study? I've already identified and given you a way to identify an Alzheimer's disease research center. And if you're not looking for an Alzheimer's disease research center, I'm going to say, and this is my bias, I need you to go to one that's associated with an academic medical center or a training place. Where is it they're providing health care, and where are they training doctors for the next to treat you? Okay, these are the questions that you can ask them. Don't go to a for-profit center, because that center's mission a lot of times is to get a number of people signed up, and you don't know where your research is going. Some for-profit centers are very accountable, and there's nothing wrong with that. They become the medium by which the research is conducted, but make sure you understand who's funding the research and who's doing the research that you choose to participate in. These are questions that you can ask, and I think they're going to make these things available to you later, but main thing is who's doing the research, Why are they doing the research? What are they getting to get you to participate in the research? And more importantly, what do you get by participating in the research? Next, please. So what is dementia? What are Alzheimer's? What are the differences? Okay, I'm going to give you the 10-minute, less than 10-minute Dementia 101. Anything that causes your brain to make it such that you don't function well and you can't take care of yourself, that's a dementing disorder. It can come from Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is the most commonly diagnosed dementia, but then you have a mixed dementia. It can be something related to Alzheimer's and maybe vascular dementia. Most commonly in African American families and Latin American families, we have hypertension, we have diabetes, we have heart disease. These are things that make us more susceptible to strokes. And strokes, lack of blood flow to your brain, make it such that you don't remember things and your brain doesn't work well. But there are other types of dementia. There's Lewy body dementia. There's frontotemporal dementia. There are people who have Parkinson's dementia, who have Parkinson's disease and have brain dysfunction. They can't remember things. They can't function and do what your brain makes you do. But then there's also alcoholic dementia. Chronic alcoholism leads to brain dysfunction. All you need to remember is my brain's not working. My relative's brain isn't working well enough such that they can remember to feed themselves, dress themselves, and toilet themselves. And now I have to do that. And regardless of what type of dementia they have, and it's fine to go around what it is, regardless of what type of dementia they have, you still need to take care of them. Next, keep going. And the end result is you still have to take care of the basic needs. So what are the risk factors for Alzheimer's? Getting old enough, genes. Females are more likely to have Alzheimer's versus males. And it's not just because we live longer. Somebody who's had repetitive head injuries, somebody who has vascular disease, which I've alluded to earlier, somebody who's not exercising enough, somebody who's not eating properly, okay? You can't control your genes, your gender, and how long you get to live. But you can control what you eat. You can control your ability to exercise. You can socialize and do other things that make it less likely that you'll develop a dementing disorder. Next, please. What are some of the symptoms of dementia? And I really felt for Reverend Byfield when she was talking about her mother with her early onset Alzheimer's. Well, we think of memory loss only in terms of Alzheimer's, but there are other things that go along with it. Aside from repetition of words and phrases, what is that? What is that, Dr. Parker? I don't know. But there are other things that you need to pay attention to. Somebody who's not able to control their bladder or their bowels, don't seem to recognize that they have to urinate and defecate. That's a neurologic problem. Somebody who has previously been a pristine organizer, pristine dresser, housekeeping's normal, neat house, good food, all of a sudden can't do that. Those are things that make it such that you need to start paying attention to that person. And a lot of times somebody living right there sees something that somebody at a distance doesn't see. So a lot of family members start arguing about what somebody's abilities are or are not. But the thing that's important is you can fight amongst each other, but this person is suffering and this person needs help. And you need to start listening and paying attention. And sometimes you have to come out of yourself a little bit, put your needs behind that of the person who seems to be affected. Sometimes people who have brain dysfunction, they don't walk well. They fall a lot. Their personality changes. All of a sudden, they're belligerent. They're confrontational. They're paranoid. They start to hallucinate. These are symptoms that indicate that somebody's having difficulty, and we need to get them to a proper medical person to evaluate some of that. Keep going. Some of the behaviors that I see as a primary care doctor are the things that drive people to the doctor. Not the fact that they've not been wearing the same clothes all week, but when they start wandering out of the house at night, not sleeping at night, wandering around such that nobody else gets to sleep. This is when I generally see them. I had a family member who didn't think there was anything wrong with their father until he liked to collect stamps, until he bought a $47,000 stamp that got his attention, that got their attention, and that's when they brought him to us. Driving difficulties, people who are getting lost all the time, somebody who has a ding on their car, all sides of the car, because they can't see, they can't judge distance, and they're not doing a good job. These are things that we need to start paying attention to. These are some of the soft signs that indicate that somebody's brain isn't working well. Keep going. How do you address these symptoms? As I've alluded to before, I need you to get to a qualified medical professional so that you can be sure that what you're seeing is something that can't be fixed. You know, maybe there's a medical reason for somebody's brain to be a little screwy. Maybe there's a reason they're forgetting things. Maybe there's a reason they're slurring their speech other than a stroke. Maybe they're not taking their medications in the proper way that in which they should. Maybe they need to have a reduction in the dose of medications. In any event, when you see things that look abnormal, that seem abnormal, please discuss it with your medical provider. And if you're not getting enough of an answer from that one, get to another one who will work with you and try to help you find a diagnosis. You'll ultimately end up in a large medical center where you can see multiple providers, but you've got to start with your primary care physician. Next. Now, I said on that last slide that research is not a substitute for a medical evaluation, and it is not. However, because of Tuskegee, and this I will mention Tuskegee now, we now have institutional review boards and other things that if they find something wrong in the course of your participation in research, they're going to refer you to give you the information you need to get to the next place such that you can get a medical evaluation. In our center, and I'm very proud of the E.M.E. Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, because a lot of the men that I work with didn't know anything about an A.M.E. church, didn't know anything about a sorority or anything else. But most importantly, they did learn over time because the women and the men of the A.M.E. church and all the other African American organizations have told them what they needed. People participating in research, if there is something abnormal, are generally referred. It's not we're not supposed to get you to a medical provider, but here at Emory, if you indicate that you need help, we're going to find those resources for you. Our brain health forums, we identify community resources and providers for our people. So I'm going to stop because I think the next person you're going to hear from is Ms. Paschal Mix, who is one of our research participants. In any event.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Monica Parker for many years. She's been a speaker at the Hopeful Symposium that I produce here in Shreveport, Louisiana, and also as a member of the Links Incorporated when she was over the health department. So Dr. Parker is full of a wealth of information, and I also participate on her weekly Tuesday Alzheimer's presentation, and you may go to Emory University to find out more about that, but they have a Tuesday there at Emory University and talk about Alzheimer's and dementia. So thank you again, Dr. Parker, for sharing that valuable information with us. And now we're going to hear from a daughter of the parsonage, as they say in the A.M.E. church, Mrs. Paschal Cummings Mix. Mrs. Mix is an old friend of mine, and I don't mean old by years, I mean a longtime friend of mine. And our fathers, both ministers in the A.M.E. church, and her father was a bishop in the 8th Episcopal District, which comprises Louisiana and Mississippi. And we're so thrilled. When I was talking to her, she was giving me some ideas, and I said, well, do you want to be on our program and talk about your involvement? And she graciously agreed to do so. So Mrs. Mix is a widow of Mr. Gregory Mix and the mother of 3 wonderful daughters, Martinique, Olympia, and Nadja. She is the loving daughter, and the caregiving daughter of Bishop Frank Curtis Cummings, and the daughter of the late, and as we know her as Mrs. Angel Cummings. We are just delighted to have Paschal with us today. She's a graduate of, she earned her bachelor's degree at the University of Denver and a master's in public administration from Clark, Atlanta. Lifelong A.M.E., and now we will hear from Mrs. Paschal Cummings Mix. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Roz. That was beautiful. We have known each other a long time. And Dr. Parker, the guru, the general, who has amassed an army of people that now know what questions to ask, what to do. And it's so amazing, and it's just so heartwarming when you listen on Tuesday to Brain Health, and it usually is in the afternoon, and you can also see it on YouTube. And you see when we have the presentations from different researchers and the people that ask the questions in the chat, because they have become equipped to learn what to say, what they need to look for when they are trying to find out information about dementia as well as Alzheimer's. Let me just tell you my story, how I got started in research study. My husband was diagnosed with colon cancer when I was 7.5 months pregnant. And at that time, they told us we really didn't have that much to look forward to. That was not something that was accepted. So we immediately began looking and researching, and what could we do? We were blessed to have great providers who steered us in the right direction, and we started in a clinical study. We were able to go to NIH in Maryland, National Institute of Health, as well as go to Birmingham. That was my first information as far as being able to do anything to do with the research. That enabled us to find out a lot about what was going on, and it also equipped us to be able to look at what we needed to do. Now, let's go to the next phase. When my mother became ill and we were trying to decide which way would we go, and listening to Attorney Henning in her testimony brought back some memories to me. And so one of the things that I know that I'm blessed, that we were blessed with, was that we were able to find information by becoming aggressive and intentional in looking at what we were going to do. So yes, we became involved in a research study. That enabled us to, 1, get involved with a support group, 2, to be able to take classes, and also 3, to find more information about medication that was available. To be involved in research doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be involved in taking a different medicine, because we know in our community we have mistrust, as well as when we talk about any type of research. But you know what? We're not there anymore. We have to move on and press on, because for us, if we want to be persons that decide what needs to be done, we have to be part of the solution. And as Dr. Parker has alluded to in her presentation, there are different forms of dementia, and Alzheimer is the majority. And we need to understand, to be able to get the proper diagnosis. To get the proper diagnosis, you need the tools to find out what you really need to do. So I would encourage all of us to not sit back. It's the same thing when you're in church and you're in your meeting and you sit back and not say anything, then you complain. No. We don't do that. We're not doing that. That's not where you are. This is the new normal. And the new normal says that we fight and we get on the battlefield and we try to do the best that we can. And our best is volunteering. And volunteering means that we do participate in research studies. Research studies mean that you could be a part of a group. You find out information, you answer questions. Yes, you might have to take some tests, but why not? Because why would I want to trust someone to tell me what is wrong with me when they don't even have any kind of history of my community? And the only way they can get that history is if I participate, or one of us participates, so that they can know what they're looking for. The things that I feel great about is when we started in research, some of the questions that some of the investigators asked seemed like they were a little bit not germane to my community. But you know what? One of the things that happened with COVID is it helped them to focus more in that they couldn't just have a person come in, that they had to really be able to reach them. And I've seen such growth with us having to be virtual, means that they had to be creative and we had to be creative. And it's allowed us the opportunity to really hone in on what are the things we need to look at when we're talking about our bodies, our brain, what we need to be preventive, how things are connected, because you know what? We do have different other health problems. Are those health problems connected to make us have another health problem? How do we find that out? We can't rely on, again, of something that happened 30 years ago with other people. We have to rely on what's going on with us. So again, I implore all of us to think about this. 1 in 3 seniors have dementia, have some form of dementia, as well as within our diaspora, and especially within our A.M.E. communion. What are we looking at? We are looking at the majority of our people having health disparity. And when we have health disparity, that means we need to try to do something about it. One of the speakers this morning said about faith and work. We have the faith, we have to do the work. Get on board, please. I implore you. Because you know what? The millennials, the Generation Z, the generation before, how will they help take care of us? That's a question. Can you answer it? Again, research is imperative. My daughter and I are in a project now. And because of that, I think that it's helped her to look at me differently. And it's also helped myself to look at myself differently. And I think that it's important that we try to encourage younger people to be a part of research as well, because those are the people that are going to be taking care of us. It's not the same as us who are in my generation who feel it an obligation in some places. Sometimes you just don't think that it's no help, so you don't even want to try to ask questions. You want to be private. You don't want to say, oh, I need help. As well as, because you're in our generation, you don't even want to say, well, how is Sister Susie doing? Because you say, oh, we're private. No, we don't have that time. It's the new normal. We cannot be like that anymore. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk to you about research, why I'm a part of it. And my last thing is, why won't you become a part of it? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mix. We really appreciate your openness. All too often in our culture, we are so private about things, I believe, that we need to be public about. One of which is talking about things that impact us. And I think that by hearing your testimony of your involvement in research, it will certainly, I hope, break the yokes of people who are concerned about the safety of participating in research. So thank you again for telling us about your journey. And we're excited to know that your daughter even is participating in the trial with you. As Dr. Parker said earlier, I think, and maybe some others alluded to the Institutional Review Board. I know that Dr. Burnett has served on the IRB in the past. And I just want to share that the Institutional Review Board approves all studies. And so things like what happened with the Tuskegee study won't happen again. So if you are recruited for a clinical trial, a clinical study, one of the things that I would suggest is that you simply ask the principal investigator, who we also call the PI, ask them, what's your IRB number? And if they can't give you the Institutional Review Board number, you know it's not an approved study, so you just kind of gently walk away from that. But the IRB approves all clinical trials that we should be considering. Now, research proves, as you've heard, that Alzheimer's affects African Americans at a 2 times greater rate. However, because researchers have not included Black people in the minority in their recruitment pool, they can't tell us why it affects us at that rate, why that disparity exists. So I'm going to talk about um, briefly the bipartisan equity in neuroscience and Alzheimer's clinical trials. We know it best by we call it the ENACT, ENACT Act. It's called Equity in Neuroscience and Alzheimer's Clinical Trials Act. And that would increase the participation of underrepresented populations in all other dementia clinical trials by expanding education and outreach of these populations, encouraging the diversity of clinical trial staff, because all too often the staff doesn't look like us, and reducing participation burden, among other priorities. Sometimes these academic healthcare institutions, and I retired from one and was very active in the research opportunities in Alzheimer's over there, but they make it difficult for people to get to the institution and make it difficult for you to participate. So we're going to talk about expanding education, increasing the outreach in the populations, encouraging diversity, and reducing the participation burden. That's what ENACT will provide for. The underrepresentation of these populations not only hinders the ability of researchers to understand the health disparities, it also restricts their knowledge of how an approved therapy or diagnostic may affect the population most likely to need it. So how can a researcher, a scientist, talk to me about the best treatment for me if I'm not included in that pool? So ENACT provides for that as well. There is therefore an urgent need for current and future research to include increased numbers of Black Americans in clinical trials to ensure that everyone benefits from advances in Alzheimer's science. Remember, ENACT, ENACT, stands for Equity in Neuroscience and Alzheimer's Clinical Trials. So we're going to ask you to not only become involved with our Alzheimer's advocacy and awareness through your church and community, but we also would like for you to consider signing on to support the ENACT Act and encourage others to do likewise. And you can do so simply by texting. And I may be the last person on earth to learn how to text, but simply text AME ALZ, AME ALZ to 52886. Again, text AME ALZ to 52886. There's also going to be information about the ENACT Act at the back of your workbook. So please help us bring more attention, awareness to why we need to participate in clinical trials, while researchers need to be sure that we are part of that recruitment pool, so that when they present those the outcomes of the studies, and when they go to then create new medicines, because that's what everything happens. It rolls down to, we're participating in clinical trials. They're finding out what's going on. They're proposing what is the best medicine to use. And so we want to be sure that we're included in that discussion. So again, AME ALZ, text to 52886. Now, a message about Congressman James Clyburn. Since 1993, Congressman James Clyburn has represented the 6th District of South Carolina. He's the 3rd ranking Democrat and serves as Majority Whip in the House of Representatives. As a national leader, he has championed rural and economic development, and many of his initiatives have become law. He is a passionate supporter of historic preservation and restoration programs, and his efforts have restored scores of historic buildings and sites on the campuses of historically Black colleges and universities. I'm a graduate of the HBCU, Paul Quinn College in Waco, Texas. Mr. Clyburn is a widower and the father of 3 daughters and grandfather to 4. Most of us know him as an active member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And just an aside, for years, I would see the stately African-American gentleman standing behind all of the presidents. And I didn't know who he was until maybe some 15, 20 years ago, but he has always been on the scene. He's always been actively engaged. And so Congressman Clyburn was going to be with us today in person. However, we know that things are going on. Things are very critical in the United States and abroad today. So we got a call from his staff saying that he would not be able to join us live today, and was very disappointed in that, because he is an active member of the A.M.E. Church, as I mentioned, but he would do a video. So now we're going to hear a message from our own Congressman James Clyburn.
Hello, I'm Congressman Jim Clyburn. I want to thank the A.M.E. Church and the Alzheimer's Association for working to raise awareness of the most common form of dementia, Alzheimer's. We often do not hear about the tremendous impact churches make combating public health crises, but that is exactly what the A.M.E. Church has done for decades. When yellow fever arrived in Philadelphia in 1793, it was A.M.E. Bishop Richard Allen who risked his life by caring for victims and helping to unite other Black Americans to become first responders, nurses, and gravediggers. Bishop Allen's servant leadership and bravery helped save countless lives. Just as the African Methodist Episcopal Church provided leadership in addressing those with yellow fever centuries ago, today we must carry on Bishop Allen's legacy and provide leadership to help members of the A.M.E. Church and the larger community better understand the importance of participating in Alzheimer's research. Research has shown that Alzheimer's affects Black Americans at 2 times greater incidence than white Americans. Because of the lack of Black Americans in the research pool, researchers have been unable to fully study this disparity. We must continue to educate individuals on the importance of participating in clinical trials and other health research to create a more equitable healthcare system that serves the needs of all. We must all join in this fight to do what is necessary to fight dementia and make the greatness of this country accessible and affordable for all. Thank you for the powerful work that you do, and Godspeed.
Thank you so much. I'm talking to the video, but we're so grateful that Congressman Clyburn, although he didn't have the time to join us, he did make the time to create a video for us. And at this time, I'd like to ask Reverend Dr. Miriam Burnett to come on. I think she has some words and maybe talk about the questions that have been put into the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Due to the time, there are 8 questions that I can see in this forum and 2 others on our Facebook. What we would like to do is we are going to create a frequently asked questions, if you don't mind us calling it that, where we will answer those questions. Many of them have been answered already as we have gone along. There are also answers to your questions in the program guide. I put the link to that in the chat, and it was sent to you with your invitation. I will put it in the chat again as we conclude, and also add it to the Facebook. You will be able to find this entire video on our YouTube channel, on the Health Commission YouTube channel. You will also, which will also lead and link directly to the homepage of our website, amechealth.org. The FAQ will be found on the Alzheimer's page of the website. To go directly to it, it's amechealth.org/ALZ. And again, I'll put the information for both of those in the chat. At this time, we are now ready for our call to action. Bishop Francine Brookins, our chair, will now come provide us with our call to action and take us on home.
Thank you again, Dr. Burnett, and to Sister Rosalind, warrior woman Rosalind. You are a powerhouse in and of yourself, the way that you have passionately pushed this ministry through the Health Commission and through also our collaboration with the Social Action Commission, of which Bishop Henning Byfield is also the chair, greatly led by Sister Jacqueline DuPont Walker. Of course, this issue is something that requires all of us to collaborate. We were all deeply moved listening to Sister Attorney Henning's testimony about her mother and her father and about their attempts to try to provide care for their loved ones. We are all deeply impacted by this disease. And as the African Methodist Episcopal Church, we are asking you to commit to be a part of the solution in this process. We're asking you to contact your senators about the ENACT legislation that you heard of. But on a more personal level, we're asking you to be open to the possibility that someone near you may be impacted, either as a caregiver or as someone who is suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, or fearing that they're suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. We're asking you to be kind. We're asking you not to sweep things under the rug. We're asking you to acknowledge when someone doesn't seem right and to do it in gentle ways. We're asking you to organize your professionals, your volunteers in your local congregations to be a help to someone who is impacted in the congregation, to be mindful, to watch for it, and to be the gentle tap on the shoulder that says, I can walk with you through this process. Together, we are going to end Alzheimer's. But in the meantime, we have to walk with each other to share the resources that are available, to give each other courage to participate in credible studies, to make sure that we do all of the advocacy that we can, to be sensitive to the financial burden that gets placed on someone when all of a sudden they cannot remember who they are, or that they need to eat, or that they needed to go to the restroom before they went ahead and went to the restroom. These are real issues impacting us disproportionately, and we are so grateful for the 1,031 people, I think it is, who registered and participated and stayed in this. Please continue to be vigilant and to be loving and to be kind and to be aware. Share your resource. You may be the only resource that someone has. Sister Rosalind, I think you have remarks coming.
Thank you, Bishop Brookins, for that wonderful call to action. Very authentic, very sincere. And for your steadfast support of our involvement. You were on the program last year before you became Bishop Brookins, and you have continued to serve with us on our committee, and for that we are grateful. We want to thank all of the participants on today's program, and we were just blessed to have two bishops of the A.M.E. Church participate with us. The event is scheduled for the third Sunday in March, so we'll look forward to seeing you next year. I want to personally thank each of the program participants who presented today. They took their time to prepare and to come and present and to be involved with us in our church ministry. And I want to personally thank you. All of the Alzheimer's chapters are aware of the partnership, so we're doing. And we would ask that you and your church leaders reach out to your local Alzheimer's chapter to get involved. I want to give special thanks to the planning committee. You know, they say it's a heavy load and a light team, and that's exactly what we've had. but I just want to give them all the kudos because of their steadfastness, their faithfulness, you have had the information presented that we've had today. Thanks to Reverend Dr. Burnett and Dr. Hill, who are co-chairs of the AMEC Alzheimer's Partnership. They provide exemplary leadership, and for that we are grateful. I also want to thank Reverend Burnett for being with me throughout this process. You know, she's the person I text early, wake up late, text night. You know, we've been putting this together, putting that together. And you need somebody like that when you're putting together a program. And certainly one that has over 1,000 people who have signed up, who registered, and then more on Facebook and other sources. So Dr. Burnett, thank you so much. Every time I'd say, what about this? She'd say, hold on, let me do it. And that meant the world to me. Thank you. I want to thank Mr. Christopher Likes. Chris is our man about town down in South Carolina because he was instrumental in contacting Congressman Clyburn's office for us. So kudos to Chris, and thank you, Chris, for always saying yes when we ask you to do something. He's a member of our steering committee. Mrs. Virginia Harvin, who we were unable to see today, but Virginia typed up our workbook that you're going to see. And she said she couldn't do it, but she said, I'll try. And so she did. And that's what we have. So thank you, Virginia, for doing that. And then Ms. Martinique Mix, who is the daughter of Mrs. Pachelle Mix. You've seen this wonderful stained glass Zoom background behind you. And Ms. Mix created that for us. And she also designed the cover of our workbook and the borders for the pages inside. And those are just, I'm calling them out personally because they went above and beyond in helping us put the program together. So we want to also reach out, thank each of you. We could not have done what we did today without you. We could not have exceeded our goal. Our goal was 1,000 people, but you know, I said 1,000 and they said, okay. And every day we'd say, oh, where are we? But we were at 1,031 a few minutes ago. So I know that bishops pushed it out. Sister Jackie DuPont Walker, Social Action, pushed it out. Sister Deborah Taylor King, WMS, pushed it out. I know that our non-AME friends and family members pushed it out. AARP pushed it out. So it took the village to make what happened today a reality. And we know that we are all the better for having heard what we heard today. So continue to pray for each other, to pray with each other, to do what you can to help each other. Dr. Parker has the brain talk every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Central Time. And so we have some other programs. Oh, go to amechealth.org/ALZ to get more information about what it is we're doing. And I need to stop because I will talk forever. So we want to thank you again for everything you did. Thank you for this wonderful program, and I hope you have benefited from it. And now I'll ask our own Bishop Francine Angelique Brookins to come and give our benediction and sending forth.
Thank you so much. The Lord is our shepherd. We shall not want. God makes us to lie down in green pastures. God leads us beside still waters. Our great God restores our souls and leads us in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, even now, we fear no evil, for we know that God is with us. God's rod and God's staff, they comfort us. We know that God will prepare a table before us in the presence of our enemies and anoint our heads with oil, and our cups will run over, even when it seems like we're losing everything. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow us all the days of our lives, and we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. May the peace of God, the comfort of our Creator, and the provision and fellowship of our communities strengthen us and be felt by us each moment. And now, may the peace of God fill your cup. Thank you again for coming. Good night.
Good night. Amen. Thank you.